In today's business world, being an average CEO is no longer an option. That's why we're committed to equipping you with the resources and the tactics necessary to not just survive, but to thrive. You're listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline podcast, where we are more than just a voice in the crowd.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Average CEO podcast. We are here today with Jason Anthoine, and we're talking about leading for results. We're talking all about how to improve workplace culture, and Jason is an expert in that area. And so we're very glad to have him with us. Thank you so much, Jason, for being with us today.
Danielle, thank you so much. I'm just so excited to be here. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yes, and we're very glad to have you. I know we have a lot to talk about. You have a lot of expertise to share with our listeners, but I'd like to just start out. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got where you are today.
Sure. Well, it starts way back when I was a little kid. I grew up in a small town in middle Georgia called Fort Valley. Um, and my dad was a production foreman on a school bus assembly line. And my mother was a secretary at the bank, back when you could say secretary and it was okay. Um, and they would come home from work just like everybody else does and talk about what went well, what didn't go well. I liked this, I didn't like that. And, most kids at that age, that's the last thing you're interested in. But not
Of
me.
course.
I found it very interesting and absolutely fascinating. And so I went to college and I thought, well, that sounds like public relations. I'm going to study that. So I studied public relations, thinking that that's how I could get into this, and I happened to be right. And my very first job was doing the employee newsletter for a bank here in Atlanta, and that was 35 years ago. And I have been doing nothing but internal communications and employee experience and culture change since then. Of course, over my career, I've had responsibility for external comms and media relations and all those things for companies large and small. But golly, I really love internal communications and helping companies inform, involve, and inspire their employees because we spend what 8, 10, 12 hours a day sometimes at work. It ought to matter. So I love trying to figure out how to make it matter.
I love that. That is a really respectable mission.
Thank you.
I have now been running this virtual assistant business for almost 17 years, and I think the workplace
That's quite a
culture.
milestone. Let me just say right there. I mean,
Thank you.
for any small business to start up and then be there 17, I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. That really
Yes.
is. Don't undersell that. That is very impressive.
Well, thank you very much. It's been great. But certainly, it comes with challenges, and we're always looking to attract and retain top talent. And I'd love to hear, what you say to companies that are looking to retain, attract, source that type of talent, and how can they reimagine
Yeah.
what they're doing to change that, to make it better.
It feels like there's so many different industries and so many different size companies, big and large, and manufacturing versus high tech. But at the end of the day, I mean, at least for the time being, it's just a collection of humans working together, trying to drive, the results that we're all trying to achieve professionally and personally. And I think when any employee, whether they're a hypo or very talented or even middle of the road, when they're looking for a place to work, they want to, I believe, go somewhere where their contribution is appreciated and acknowledged, and B, they know that their contribution makes sense and is making a difference not only for the company and the team, but also the customers and sometimes even the community where the business might be. And so knowing those things, I think that makes it a lot easier to set the thing up right and keep it going right so that you stay focused on that. Now, it's easy to say that sentence. It's much harder to actually do that on a day-to-day basis and in practice. But if you keep the focus on the main thing, which is marketing and everything we do from a sales perspective is making a promise out in the marketplace, and everybody else here is responsible for keeping those promises. in the workplace. So what can we do to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to do that so that A, they feel good about it, B, we prosper as an organization, and C, we're really delighting our customers. All those things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see that, not only in our industry, but in the clients that we work with, across many different industries. Where do you think it comes from that companies, really of any size, small or large companies, and those leaders end up having a hard time communicating with employees? Where do you think that comes from, and what do you think can be done about that?
Well, I mean, you said it, it's hard. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it is hard. Even if you're natural at it, you got to take the time to do it. And then, oh my gosh, what if I do it? And then somebody has some feedback, then you have to take the time to understand what that feedback is and what to do with it. So I think the biggest challenge is usually because it is hard, or at least people think it is, and they're partly right there. And I think the other challenge is that the time people think, oh my gosh, I have to be a rock star communicator and I have to do town halls, I have to do videos, or I have to get the team together X number of times a week. And it just feels like there's not enough time. I have a day job. I don't have time to be doing all this stuff. But the reality is that you do have time. You're communicating all day long, whether you know it or not. So whatever your natural communication style is, just use that to figure out how best to communicate with your employees, and then ask them, of course, if that's appropriate. Hey, we do a lot of emails around here. Would you rather have something else besides that? And find out what that is, and then just do that on a consistent basis. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
leaders and managers feel like I don't have the training, or I don't have the background, or I'm an engineer. I'm not creative. I can't write stuff like this. Yes, you
Sure.
can. Yes, you can. I mean, there's billions of people on all these social media platforms. They're your employees. They're probably you too. I mean, you're putting up your photos from your vacation. That's communicating. That's being creative. It's the same exact thing inside the organization, and you shouldn't be intimidated by it. It should feel natural because it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can talk a little bit about communication styles. Can you define for the audience, like what that might look like, what someone's communication style might be, if they're having trouble sort of understanding that or identifying that for themselves?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A lot of times, communication style gets defined in sort of multiple ways. So sometimes it's about the channels, which is I might have a distributed team and I can't be in front of them physically all the time because that's just not how work is anymore. So I get really comfortable with Teams, Zoom, or Slack, or whatever that platform might be that does connect you when you can't be together physically. Um, and that's a totally different skill set than maybe what you had been used to before all of these platforms came along. So sometimes
Mm.
that style, other times style is, well, I'm more of an introvert and it makes me uncomfortable to do these kinds of things. Yeah. So you might default to more writing versus speaking or being in person. Um, so there's a lot of different styles. I think employees are less concerned about that and just more concerned about what is it that you're saying when we do communicate? Like that's what's important is how are you helping employees understand what they're trying to do and what we're trying to do as an organization, giving them the right feedback so they stay, true to whatever that mission and vision might be. And then of course recognize them when they do that. So all those things, you don't have to have fancy channels. You don't have to have, some sort of MBA. You just have to really want to. You already know how to do it. You just need to want to do it a little bit more and get better at it over time. And your employees will certainly appreciate you making the effort. They don't expect you to be perfect. They just expect you to be yourself.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that from your work that one of the exercises that you do with your clients is something that you call what employees want conversations. And
Mhm.
so I know personally in our company, we've done sort of the standard employee focus groups. We've done things like 360 reviews, anonymous reviews. How are those types of um, groups different than what you do with your clients, called the what the employees want conversations? And how does that differ? And how is what you're doing better? And how can our audience learn from that?
Sure. I don't know that it's better. You certainly get different data, and it's a kind of a different experience. So I think it's complementary to whatever it is you're already doing, and hopefully you're doing something, even if it's just, informal types of things. That's better than not doing anything at all, for sure. But what we found is that a lot of times when organizations are doing focus groups or surveys or anything like that, it feels very formal, like a lawyer wrote all
Mhm.
these questions and I'm just reading what they told me to ask. So it doesn't feel natural, and it doesn't feel conversational. And secondly, they're not going to tell you the truth because you work there, the same place where they work. And so there's all kind of politics that go into that and make people feel uncomfortable. So even if you ask them the question and you have the type of culture where they will tell you, they're not going to tell you everything because people are a little bit shy about that kind of stuff. So the advantage of working with someone who's not you is that employees will tell those people absolutely everything, even when they have full knowledge that you're going to turn around and tell them, the leaders and the managers of the organization, those things. They want those leaders and managers to know those things. They just don't feel comfortable telling them those things themselves.
Mhm.
So having a go-between, I think, gives you a good bit more comfort and safety, and it's just an easier way for employees to share what's really on their minds, and it allows you to kind of get unvarnished. Here's exactly what they had to say, kinds of data in return. And so, anytime that you can do that, you end up with something that's, I think, very complementary to what you're already doing. And if what you're already doing feels kind of rational, then this
Mhm.
component to me is a little more on the emotional side. And it's more about why do you feel this way and why do you think this way versus what do you think. So we spend a whole lot of time on the why.
I understand that. Yes, I can see how someone would feel more comfortable talking to, an independent third party, a professional, um, even just sort of being a buffer between those things.
And making
In
it
your
and making it very conversational. Like,
yeah.
I'm going to come into a room and I want to meet with these employees. I don't necessarily need to know their name. I don't need to know what they're doing. People feel kind of funny when all my comments are being associated with who I am, and I don't know what might happen. I don't want to know any of that. I just want to ask you some questions and have a conversation and understand what's going on in this organization. And that might be in the conference room, it might be in the break room, it might be down the street at Applebee's, it could be anywhere. But let's just have a frank conversation about what's working and what's not, so we can figure out what to do better.
Yeah. And do you feel that even just the act of an employer making the effort to bring someone in, do you feel like that can be a positive impact on the culture and the workplace for the employees just by knowing that the owners or the leaders of the company care enough to do that?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, you can get a lot of credit for that, even if you don't bring someone in from the outside. Just showing that you care enough to ask employees what they think and what they want, and then when they tell you, circling back to say thank you for sharing that stuff, and here are the things that you said, and here's what we're going to be able to do or not do about what we talked about. So just the very fact that you're even asking that. Um, Sort of changes the dynamic within the workplace. Things tend to be a little bit more open. They tend to be a little bit more trusting, and it just goes a long way in building those stronger relationships with your employees. Just by doing it, even if you're doing it yourself, that's better than not doing it at all, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you worked with hundreds of companies, over your career. And I'm just wondering if you could wave a magic wand and you could make things better for companies,
Golly, I
the
would pay a
leaders,
lot.
employees.
I would pay a lot for that magic wand.
So what would that be? What would you change, right away if you could?
I would wave the magic wand and help leaders and employees, but mostly leaders and managers, understand that there's two types of communications in the organization. There's big C, capital C, which is everything that comes from headquarters, everything that comes from leaders, things that, quote, communicators are probably sending out on the company's behalf. And in any organization, that's about 10% of whatever the communications are that are going on. The other 90% is more important, and that's little c communications. And that's everything else besides the big C stuff. And that includes conversations that leaders and managers are having with their employees, or teams meetings, or shift change huddles. All those things fall into the little c category. And I think most organizations default to, oh, well, we need more big C stuff. Maybe. Usually you need way more and way better little c stuff, because that's the majority of the stuff going on. And that's what employees want and need the most from the people closest to them in the org, that they work with and trust every single day. So that, to me, if I could wave that magic wand, it would be reduce the reliance on big C communications and increase the reliance on little c communications, because that, like we talked earlier, that feels more emotional, and the big C stuff feels a little more rational. And it's emotion, just like with a brand. People are emotional about a brand. They're not rational about a brand. I'm going to pay more for this thing just because I love it. That's not rational. That's emotional. Same thing with
Sure.
employees. I'm going to feel better about working here by making an emotional decision, not a rational decision, usually.
Yeah, I really like that distinction. I think that's important, and I think that CEOs, uh, tend to forget about that distinction.
I think the other thing they forget about, you tell me what you think. I mean, you interview a lot of folks that work with CEOs too. It feels like at some point in your career, you lose touch with reality. Like when you are first starting out in an organization,
Mhm.
and then you kind of look up and see the senior leaders, you might say to yourself, I don't understand why they're deciding this way. And if I ever get up there, I'm going to do things differently. And then 10, 15 years go by and you do get up there, and then you end up doing the same thing that you didn't really agree with back when you were first starting out. So I don't understand what happens during that time period and that process. But if leaders, particularly CEOs, can keep that in mind, that's just a game changer to me, because I understand what you're doing because I used to do it. And here's the challenges, and here's the opportunities, and here's all the rewards. And the more that they can, really empathize with employees, particularly if they started out there and started out doing the same kind of job that most of employees are doing for them, the easier it is for people to trust them and build relationships with them, because, oh, well, he's not just out here walking around because some lawyer or the comms people told him to. He's out here walking around because he's interested, because he used to be out here. So that's just a totally different dynamic. And there's just a whole lot of positives that come out of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, that's all great information. The wheels are definitely spinning for me. Um, before we
Good.
close out today,
Yeah.
we ask this question of all of our guests, because the title of our podcast is Not Your Average CEO.
Uh-huh.
We'd love to hear, what that means to you, to be an above average CEO, and
Mhm.
conversely, the best type of advice that you have, that you've received,
Yeah.
in your business.
Yeah. Well, I love the title of the podcast and the concept that, not your average CEO. First of all, average is pretty good. Like there's a lot who aren't even average. So if you are average, good on you. Keep doing that. You can get better. And that's what being above average means. And to me, in my mind, that means you understand implicitly that communications is a leadership responsibility and not just a department down the hall. And so because you understand that, you lean into it more. You're a little more transparent, you're a little more honest, and you're a lot more comfortable in your role in helping your employees understand where we're going and why, and what they can do to help us get there. And so to me, that's the difference between average and above average, is that you understand that. And right along next to that is you understand it and you want to do something about it. Because I can understand a whole lot of things, like my doctor says, you need to go and exercise more. Yep, I understand that, but then I don't do it. So that doesn't count. So same thing here, and CEOs need to understand that if they want to be above average, and then they need to want to do something about it. And it's not complicated or hard. Just be yourself.
Yes. Yep. That is wonderful. Wonderful advice. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. Can you share with us, share with our audience, and we'll include this information in the show notes as well, but where can they find you? If they want to learn more about you, more about working together.
Sure thing. I've got a big mouth and I like to run it, so you can find me in a lot of places. First of all, my website, and for your listeners here, they can go to jasonanthoine.com/Not Your Average CEO Lifeline. And there's a special page set up just for y'all where you can download a couple of helpful materials around when and how to ask employees what they want and things like that. And of course, there's some other stuff on the rest of the site. And then I have my own podcast called Riding Shotgun with Jason Anthoine. You can get the link to that directly from that my website as well. And then, of course, they'll let you say most anything on LinkedIn, and so I do. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and I hope you follow me, and I'll follow you back because I'd love to hear what you have to say as well. So that's where you can find me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today and taking the time out of your busy schedule to share this information with everyone. And we were very glad to have you today.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate everybody listening, and I appreciate you having me here and asking such great questions. So it's been good. It's been good, really enjoyable.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline with your hosts Danielle Cuomo, CEO, and Nicole Glitchio, Els, COO. This podcast has been sponsored by Virtual Assist USA. If you'd like to know more about the hosts or exploring virtual assistant services, visit virtualassistusa.com for more information.